Hello, friends. Welcome back to Book Demystified once again. And today, we're going to discuss about the book Mind Over Money by Claudia Hammond. You know what's absolutely mind-blowing? Every single day, you make dozens of decisions about money, and most of them happen without you even realizing it. That morning latte, the impulse buy at Target, choosing the expensive shampoo over the generic brand. Your brain is constantly processing financial choices, but here's the kicker. It's not always making rational decisions. Think about this for a second. You're the same person who will spend 20 minutes researching the best deal on a $30 phone charger online, comparing prices across 5 different websites, reading reviews, maybe even waiting for a coupon code. But then you'll walk into Starbucks and drop $6 on a drink without even thinking about it. Or you'll argue with your friends about splitting a restaurant bill down to the penny, but then blow $200 on clothes you don't really need because they were on sale. Does this sound familiar? Well, what if I told you that there's actual science behind why our brains do this crazy stuff with money? What if I told you that understanding the psychology of money could completely transform how you handle your finances? Not by forcing you to become some super disciplined robot, but by working with your brain instead of against it. That's exactly what Claudia Hammond explores in this fascinating book. She's a psychology lecturer and broadcaster who spent years digging into the research about how our minds really work when it comes to money. And trust me, what she discovered will make you question everything you thought you knew about your own financial behavior. So here's where it gets really interesting. Hammond starts by explaining that our brains literally aren't designed for the modern financial world. Think about it. For most of human history, people lived in small groups where everything was about immediate survival. You found food, you ate it. You needed shelter, you built it right away. The concept of delayed gratification, of saving money for something months or years in the future, of complex financial planning, that's all brand new in terms of human evolution. But now we're living in this world where we have to constantly make decisions about abstract concepts like credit scores and retirement accounts and compound interest. We're trying to use Stone Age brains to navigate Space Age financial systems, and frankly, it's no wonder we're all a little messed up when it comes to money. Let me give you a perfect example that Hammond talks about. Have you ever noticed how you feel differently about spending cash versus using a credit card? Like, when you hand over actual bills, it somehow feels more real than just tapping your card or using Apple Pay. That's not just in your head. That's your brain responding to what psychologists call payment depreciation. When you use cash, you literally feel the physical loss. Your wallet gets lighter. You see the money leave your hands. But with digital payments, that connection is broken. It becomes this abstract number on a screen, and our brains have a much harder time processing that as a real loss. This is why casinos use chips instead of cash, and why so many apps and stores are pushing for digital payments. They know it makes you spend more. I learned this lesson the hard way when I started using one of those budgeting apps that tracks all your spending automatically. I thought I was being pretty responsible with my money, but when I saw the numbers all laid out, how much I was spending on food delivery, on random Amazon purchases, on subscription services I'd forgotten about, it was honestly shocking. My brain had been treating all those digital transactions like they weren't real money. But here's what's really wild. Hammond explains that even when we know about these psychological tricks, they still work on us. It's like optical illusions. Even when someone explains how the illusion works, your brain still sees it the same way. Our financial psychology operates at such a deep level that conscious knowledge alone isn't enough to override it. Take the concept of mental accounting, for example. This is where we treat money differently depending on where it comes from or what we plan to use it for. So you might be super careful with your regular paycheck, budgeting every dollar, but then you get a tax refund or a birthday gift of cash, and suddenly you're ready to blow it on something fun because it feels like free money. Or here's another one that got me, the sunk cost fallacy. You know when you've already spent money on something, so you keep spending more money on it even though it's clearly not working out? Like when you've already paid for a gym membership you never use, but you keep renewing it because you've already invested so much. Or when you're at a restaurant and the food is terrible, but you force yourself to finish it because you paid for it. Hammond explains that this happens because our brains hate the idea of wasting money, even when the rational thing to do would be to cut our losses and move on. We get emotionally attached to our past financial decisions, even the bad ones. But here's where it gets really practical. Once you understand these psychological patterns, you can actually use them to your advantage. Hammond shares this technique called mental budgeting, where instead of fighting against your brain's tendency to treat different money differently, you actually lean into it. So instead of having one big savings account, you create different mental categories, or even different actual accounts for different goals. You have your emergency fund money, your vacation fund money, your new car fund money. Even though rationally it's all the same money that could be used for anything, psychologically it becomes much easier to resist spending your emergency fund on clothes because your brain sees that money as already being allocated for something specific. I started doing this with my own finances, and it was like a light bulb went off. Instead of having this vague goal of saving more money, I created specific accounts for specific things I wanted. I had my move to a better apartment fund, my take my parents on vacation fund, my start a side business fund. And you know what happened? I started saving way more money because each purchase decision became a choice between what I wanted right now versus these specific future goals that felt real and tangible. Another fascinating concept Hammond explores is how our perception of time affects our money decisions. She talks about this thing called present bias, where we consistently overvalue immediate rewards and undervalue future benefits. It's why we'll choose to buy something today instead of investing that money for retirement, even though we know rationally that the retirement money will be worth more in the long run. But here's what's crazy. The strength of this present bias actually changes based on how we think about time. When researchers ask people if they'd rather have $50 today or $60 in a month, most people choose the $50 today. But when they ask if people would rather have $50 in 12 months or $60 in 13 months, most people choose to wait the extra month for the $60. Same time period, same money, but when both options are in the future, we're much better at making the rational choice. This explains so much about why we struggle with long-term financial planning. When retirement feels like this distant, abstract thing, it's really hard to motivate ourselves to save for it. But when we can make it feel more immediate and concrete, we're much more likely to make good decisions. One technique Hammond suggests is what she calls future self-visualization. Instead of thinking about retirement as some vague concept, you actually spend time imagining yourself at retirement age. What will you look like? Where will you want to live? What will you want to be doing with your time? The more vivid and specific you can make this future version of yourself, the more real it becomes to your present-day brain, and the easier it becomes to make sacrifices now for that future person's benefit. I tried this exercise myself, and it was honestly pretty emotional. I imagined myself at 65, maybe wanting to travel, maybe wanting to pursue hobbies I don't have time for now, definitely wanting to not stress about money. And when I really let myself feel what it would be like to be that age and financially secure versus that age and still worrying about paying bills, it made my current saving and investing feel so much more important and urgent. Hammond also dives deep into the psychology of spending, and this is where things get really interesting for those of us trying to understand our own financial behavior. She explains that spending money activates the same reward centers in our brain as eating good food or having sex. Literally, shopping gives us a neurochemical high. But here's the thing, just like with food or other pleasures, we can develop tolerance. The more we shop, the more we need to spend to get that same feeling of satisfaction. This is why people develop shopping addictions and why retail therapy stops working if you do it too much. She also talks about something called retail therapy, which turns out to be a real psychological phenomenon, not just something people joke about. When we're feeling sad or stressed or powerless, spending money can actually provide temporary relief because it gives us a sense of control and accomplishment. The problem is, it's temporary relief that often makes our long-term problems worse. Hey, if you're enjoying our free book summaries and want to support what we do, there are a few easy ways to help. You can subscribe to the channel, become a member, or grab the book using our affiliate link in the description. And if you'd like to go a step further, you can also leave a tip via PayPal or UPI. The link's below. Every bit of support helps us create valuable content for you. Now, one of the most eye-opening sections of the book deals with how our emotions around money are shaped by our childhood experiences and cultural background. Hammond explains that we all have what she calls money scripts, these deep-seated beliefs about money that we learned early in life, often without even realizing them. Maybe you grew up in a household where money was always tight, and you learned that spending money on anything non-essential was wasteful or selfish. Or maybe you grew up in a family where money was used as a way to show love, so now you have trouble saying no to expensive gifts or experiences because it feels like you're being unloving. These scripts run so deep that they often contradict our rational financial goals. You might logically know that you should invest more money, but if you have a deep-seated script that says investing is gambling or the stock market is just for rich people, you'll find ways to sabotage your own investment plans. I realized I had some of these scripts when I started tracking my spending patterns. I noticed that I had this weird relationship with spending money on myself versus spending money on other people. I would agonize over buying a $20 book for myself, but I'd happily spend $100 on dinner for friends without thinking twice about it. When I dug into it, I realized I had learned growing up that spending money on yourself was selfish, but spending money on others was generous and good. The problem was, this script was preventing me from investing in things that would actually improve my life and my earning potential, like courses, books, better equipment for work, even just basic self-care stuff. I was being generous in ways that were actually keeping me financially stuck. But once I recognized this pattern, I could start to challenge it. I started treating investments in myself as investments in my ability to help other people in the future. If I could earn more money by developing my skills, then I'd have more money available to be generous with. It sounds simple, but reframing it this way made it much easier for me to justify spending money on my own growth and development. Hammond also explores the fascinating psychology behind our relationship with debt. She explains that debt doesn't just affect our finances, it literally affects our mental and physical health. People with high levels of debt have higher rates of depression, anxiety, and even physical ailments like headaches and insomnia. But here's what's really interesting. The psychological impact of debt isn't just about the amount you owe. It's also about how that debt makes you feel about yourself and your future. People who view their debt as an investment in their future, like student loans for education or business loans for starting a company, tend to experience less psychological distress than people who view their debt as evidence of their own poor decision-making. This doesn't mean all debt is psychologically equal. Clearly, credit card debt from impulse purchases is different from a mortgage on a house. But it does mean that how we think about and frame our debt can actually impact how it affects our overall well-being. One technique Hammond suggests for dealing with debt psychology is what she calls debt reframing. Instead of thinking about debt payments as punishment for past mistakes, you think about them as purchases of future freedom. Every payment you make is literally buying back your financial independence. It's the same money leaving your account, but the psychological impact is completely different. The book also delves into the psychology of investing, which I found incredibly relevant given how many people are intimidated by the stock market. Hammond explains that our brains are naturally wired to notice and remember losses more intensely than gains. This is called loss aversion, and it's why seeing your investment account go down by $1,000 feels much worse than seeing it go up by $1,000 feels good. This psychological quirk makes investing feel much riskier and scarier than it actually is statistically. We focus on the possibility of losing money and downplay the historical reality that diversified long-term investing has been one of the most reliable ways to build wealth over time. But Hammond also explains why financial advisors who tell people to just ignore the volatility are missing the point. You can't just tell someone to ignore their psychological responses. You have to work with them. One technique she suggests is to check your investment accounts less frequently. If you're checking your 401k balance every day, you're going to see lots of small fluctuations that will trigger that loss aversion response even when the overall trend is positive. I used to check my investment accounts obsessively, especially when the market was going through a rough patch. Every red number felt like a personal failure, and I found myself wanting to sell everything and just keep my money in savings where it felt safe. But when I limited myself to checking maybe once a month, those day-to-day fluctuations became much less emotionally significant. I could see the bigger picture trends instead of getting caught up in the noise. Another psychological concept that Hammond explores is what she calls money avoidance. This is when people are so stressed or overwhelmed by their financial situation that they just stop paying attention to it altogether. They don't open their credit card statements. They don't check their bank balances. They don't think about retirement planning because thinking about money makes them feel anxious and inadequate.
The problem is, avoiding your financial reality doesn't make it go away. It usually makes it worse. Bills still come due, interest still accumulates, investment opportunities still pass you by. But the anxiety that drives the avoidance is real and valid, and you can't just force yourself to get over it. Hammond suggests starting with what she calls financial mindfulness, just observing your money-related thoughts and emotions without judgment. Instead of beating yourself up for feeling anxious about checking your bank balance, you just notice the anxiety, acknowledge it, and then gently redirect your attention to taking small, manageable financial actions. This might mean starting by just checking your account balance once a week, or reading one article about personal finance, or calculating how much you spent on one category of expenses last month. The goal isn't to solve all your financial problems at once. It's to build your tolerance for engaging with financial information without becoming overwhelmed. One of the most practical sections of the book deals with what Hammond calls choice architecture. Basically, how the way choices are presented to us affects what we decide. This has huge implications for our financial decisions because so many of our money choices happen in environments that are specifically designed to influence our behavior. For example, grocery stores put the most expensive items at eye level and the cheaper options on the bottom shelves where you have to bend down to see them. Credit card companies send you pre-approved offers when they know you're most likely to be financially stressed. Car dealerships structure their financing options to make monthly payments seem more affordable than the total price. But once you understand how choice architecture works, you can use it to your advantage. Hammond suggests restructuring your own financial environment to make good choices easier and bad choices harder. This might mean setting up automatic transfers to savings so you don't have to actively choose to save money each month. Or it might mean deleting shopping apps from your phone so you have to make a more deliberate effort to make impulse purchases. I started applying this principle to my own life in small but powerful ways. Instead of keeping my credit cards in my wallet where they were easy to use, I put them in a drawer at home and started carrying only cash for discretionary spending. Instead of having my investment apps on my phone's home screen where I'd see them constantly, I moved them to a folder so I'd have to make a conscious choice to check them. These changes didn't require any willpower or discipline. They just made the default choice the better choice. And that's the key insight from behavioral psychology. We don't need to become different people to make better financial decisions. We just need to understand how our minds work and structure our environment accordingly. Hammond also explores the social psychology of money, which is something most personal finance advice completely ignores. Our financial decisions don't happen in a vacuum. They're influenced by our friends, our family, our coworkers, our social media feeds, our cultural background. Understanding these social influences is crucial for making lasting changes to our financial behavior. For example, she talks about something called social proof. We look at what other people are doing as a guide for what we should do. If all your friends are buying expensive cars and going on lavish vacations, it becomes much harder to stick to your own budget and savings goals. You start to feel like you're missing out or being too restrictive. But here's what's interesting. This same psychological principle can work in your favor if you surround yourself with people who have good financial habits. If your friend group includes people who talk openly about investing, who are excited about reaching savings milestones, who make thoughtful spending decisions, that becomes your new normal. This is why Hammond suggests being very intentional about the financial content you consume and the conversations you have about money. Instead of following social media accounts that make you feel bad about your financial situation or that constantly promote expensive lifestyles, follow accounts that share practical financial advice and celebrate smart money decisions. One thing that really struck me from the book is how Hammond talks about the relationship between money and happiness. There's been tons of research on this topic, and the findings are pretty nuanced. Money does increase happiness, but only up to a certain point, and the relationship isn't what most people think it is. The research shows that having enough money to meet your basic needs and have some financial security does significantly increase life satisfaction. But beyond that point, more money has diminishing returns in terms of happiness. What matters more is how you spend the money you have, not necessarily how much money you have. Hammond explains that experiences tend to make us happier than material purchases. Spending money on other people makes us happier than spending money on ourselves, and spending money in ways that align with our values makes us happier than spending money just to impress others.
But here's what's really important. This doesn't mean that wanting financial security or even wealth is shallow or wrong. Financial stress genuinely makes people miserable, and having money provides options and freedom that can significantly improve quality of life. The key is understanding what you really want from money, not just accumulating it for its own sake. For me, this research helped clarify my own financial goals. I realized that what I really wanted from money wasn't luxury or status. It was freedom. The freedom to choose work I found meaningful rather than just work that paid well. The freedom to help family members when they needed it. The freedom to take risks and pursue opportunities without worrying about basic security. Once I got clear on that, it became much easier to make financial decisions that aligned with those deeper values rather than just following generic advice about what I should do with money. As we wrap up, let me share what I think is the most important insight from Hammond's book. Financial psychology isn't about finding the right way to think about money. It's about understanding how you personally think about money and then working with your psychological patterns rather than against them. Maybe you're someone who's motivated by big, exciting goals, so you should focus on visualizing the amazing life you'll have when you reach financial independence. Or maybe you're someone who's motivated by security and avoiding risk, so you should focus on building an emergency fund and choosing conservative investments that let you sleep well at night. Maybe you're someone who does better with automatic systems that don't require daily decisions. Or maybe you're someone who likes to be actively involved in tracking and optimizing every aspect of your finances. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to money psychology. The key is to get curious about your own patterns and preferences instead of judging them. When you find yourself making financial decisions that don't align with your stated goals, instead of beating yourself up, get curious. What emotions were you feeling? What thoughts were going through your head? What environmental factors might have influenced the decision? Hammond's research shows that self-awareness, not self-discipline, is the real key to improving your financial behavior. And that's actually incredibly empowering because it means you don't have to become a completely different person to have a healthy relationship with money. You just have to understand the person you already are. So here's your challenge for this week. Pick one financial behavior you'd like to change, and instead of trying to force yourself to change it through willpower alone, get curious about the psychology behind it. What emotions or thoughts or environmental factors are driving that behavior? How could you work with those psychological patterns instead of against them? Remember, your brain isn't broken or irrational when it comes to money. It's just operating according to systems that evolved for a very different world than the one we live in today. But once you understand how those systems work, you can use that knowledge to make financial decisions that actually serve your long-term goals and values.
Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video, where we continue exploring the fascinating psychology behind our everyday decisions.